Deep inside a German command post, officers hovered over maps that shaped the fate of entire battalions. At the center of the room sat the man they trusted most, a quiet analyst with an uncanny ability to recall every route, every figure, every coded phrase. They believed he was brilliant. They never imagined he couldn't see a single thing on the table in front of him. He moved through their war machine guided not by sight, but by sound, memory, and instincts sharpened by darkness. Blindness, the flaw that should have exposed him instantly, became the perfect disguise. No one expects a blind man to be dangerous. One morning, a suspicious officer placed a critical document in front of him, a blank page. If he hesitated, he was dead. Instead, he ran his fingers across it, nodded confidently, and recited a report he'd memorized from overhearing a conversation hours earlier. The officer, stunned, praised him. What they didn't know was that the man feeding them their most trusted intelligence couldn't even see the papers in front of him. He was born in a small European town where curiosity was as natural to him as breathing. Long before war consumed the continent, he was known for a sharp mind that absorbed information like a sponge. He devoured newspapers, memorized entire paragraphs after a single reading, and picked up languages by simply listening to conversations in cafes or train stations. His teachers watched him with a mix of admiration and bewilderment, convinced he was destined for a future built on intellect and discipline. He grew into adulthood with a quiet confidence, the kind that made people trust him without question. He worked with precision, moved with purpose, and noticed details others overlooked. Nothing escaped him, a habit that would one day save countless lives. He was a man of promise, clarity, and direction. No one, least of all him, imagined that everything he relied on would soon be taken away. The eyes that once read the world with such hunger were living on borrowed time. Before darkness claimed his vision, he lived a life shaped by ambition and learning, unaware that his greatest strength would emerge only after the lights went out. He never forgot the day the world dimmed. One moment, his life followed a clear path shaped by knowledge and ambition. The next, everything dissolved into darkness. It happened without warning. An accident, a flash of pain, doctors rushing, voices blurring into panic. When he opened his eyes, nothing returned. Shapes, colors, faces, all gone. The man who once devoured pages now couldn't see the outline of his own hand. Doctors spoke gently, but their words cut the deepest. There is no cure. In an instant, his future collapsed. Friends pitied him. Employers dismissed him. Society quietly pushed him aside, convinced blindness meant the end of usefulness. He felt trapped inside a body that no longer obeyed him, mourning a life that had vanished overnight. But beneath despair, something stubborn refused to die. In the emptiness, he sensed a new kind of awareness growing. Sharper, quieter, more disciplined than sight had ever been. He didn't know it yet, but the darkness that threatened to destroy him would soon become the very thing that made him unstoppable. In the months after losing his sight, he wandered through a world that felt hostile and unfamiliar. Yet as he struggled to rebuild himself, others began to notice something extraordinary. His hearing sharpened, his memory expanded. He could recall entire conversations word for word, sense people's movements by the shift of air, and navigate rooms using only instinct. What began as survival slowly became mastery. One evening, a resistance contact overheard him flawlessly analyzing a German broadcast, using nothing but sound and memory. Intrigued, they They tested him with coded messages, maps described aloud, and rapid-fire questions meant to overwhelm. He passed every test with a calm precision that startled even seasoned operatives. To them, he wasn't disabled. He was a weapon the enemy would never see coming. They recruited him quietly, teaching him the art of deception, coded communication, and intelligence gathering without ever touching a page. In darkness, he discovered a new identity. He was no longer a man broken by fate, but one reborn with a purpose hidden from the world above his blindness. Once a curse, had become the perfect cover for a spy. Stepping inside the German command offices felt like entering the jaws of a beast that devoured mistakes. Uniforms brushed past him, boots struck the floor with rigid precision, and every conversation carried the weight of life and death, yet he walked among them with the calm assurance of a man who seemed harmless. A blind clerk, a quiet assistant, someone no one would ever suspect. They handed him reports, troop routes, and intercepted messages, believing he was reviewing each one carefully. He simply nodded, relying on memory from conversations he'd overheard hours earlier, piecing together entire strategies in his mind. His blindness disarmed them. Officers spoke freely around him, assuming he absorbed nothing beyond the surface. But he caught every whisper, every slip, every coded detail muttered under breath. He became their trusted analyst, their hidden asset, and their greatest vulnerability. With each subtle suggestion he offered, he reshaped troop movements, diverted convoys, and redirected German confidence toward carefully crafted illusions. Every day inside that building was a dance with death, but he moved with flawless precision, knowing that one misstep would expose everything. For months he maneuvered through danger with silent precision, until the day suspicion finally caught up to him. A German officer known for his sharp instincts and sharper temper began watching him too closely. One morning, under the pretense of urgency, the officer slammed a new file onto his desk. But the moment he touched it, he knew something was wrong. The pages were blank around him. The room fell into an unnatural stillness. This wasn't a routine check. It was a trap. If he hesitated, even for a breath, everything would be over. He steadied his shaking hands, tracing the empty paper as though studying its contents. Then, with measured calm, he recited a detailed report he had memorized earlier from a conversation 2 rooms away. His voice never cracked. His explanation was flawless. The officer stared at him for a long, cold moment before muttering approval and walking off. Only then did he allow himself a single, quiet breath. He had survived by inches. One wrong word, one stumble, one flicker of panic, and the Germans would have discovered that their most trusted analyst couldn't see the traps placed directly before him. The moment that would define his entire mission began with a whisper. German officers crowded around a massive table, debating an upcoming Allied operation. They were confident, convinced they had predicted the enemy's next move. But their confidence rested on intelligence he had carefully poisoned over weeks. Subtle alterations, slight misinterpretations, tiny shifts that seemed harmless in isolation, yet devastating when combined. Now, everything depended on whether his deception would take hold. As tensions rose, he offered a quiet assessment delivered with the authority they had come to trust. His words nudged their strategy just a few degrees off course, enough to send entire battalions marching in the wrong direction, enough to buy the Allies precious time. The officers nodded, believing they had outsmarted their enemies. But he knew the truth. His blindness, once his greatest loss, had become a weapon sharper than any blade. His mind had infiltrated their war plans so deeply that they never questioned his guidance. When the operation unfolded and German forces found themselves disastrously misaligned, he realized the full weight of what he had done. One blind man had shifted the course of a battle the world would later study, never knowing who truly turned its tide. When the war finally began to crack and collapse around the German command, he slipped back into the shadows as quietly as he had entered them. No medals waited for him. No grand speeches honored his name. Spies, especially those who operated in silence, rarely received recognition, and blind spies received even less. He returned home with nothing but the weight of everything he had done, the lives he had saved, the lies he had crafted, and the constant fear he had carried for years. Those who knew him before the darkness noticed the change immediately. He moved with the same calm precision, but his silence had deepened. He spoke little of the war, even less of the danger, and never of the moments when a single misstep could have ended everything. To the outside world, he appeared ordinary again, a man living a modest life shaped by routine, but beneath that quiet exterior lived memories sharp as razors. He understood what few ever could. Victory often depended on people whose names would never appear in history books. His mission had ended, but the burden of secrecy remained, a shadow he carried long after the guns fell silent. History rarely remembers the quiet heroes, and his name became one more story lost in dusty archives. Yet his legacy lived on in ways numbers could never measure. He proved that strength has nothing to do with sight, that vision comes from clarity of purpose rather than the ability to see a map or a uniform. In a war built on deception, power, and fear, he showed that resilience thrives in the unlikeliest places. His blindness, once seen as a crippling weakness, became the very force that allowed him to operate unnoticed, slipping through the cracks of an army trained to fear what it could see, not what it couldn't. Generations later, those who learned fragments of his story found themselves inspired by a simple truth. Greatness is not granted by circumstance. It is forged in darkness, in loss, in moments when the world expects nothing and a single individual chooses to rise anyway. His life reminded the world that courage isn't always loud and heroism isn't always recognized. Sometimes, the most powerful figures in history are the ones who move unseen, changing the course of events not with weapons or rank, but with unwavering will. His legacy endures as a testament that even in humanity's darkest chapters, a single unseen light can still reshape the course of a war and the world beyond it.